requested to react to this. Someone sent me some rupees to react to this, so of course I'm going to check it out. Of course I'm going to check it out, just to be polite, and maybe it'll provide incentive for others. No, who knows? If it's something good, it's something good. But this is Modern Indian Destroyer, creation of an indigenous naval capability. Indigenous? Did I actually say that? Read that correctly? Holy crap! I actually did pretty good. Delhi to whatever. I don't know. I think it's about the type of ship. But yeah, that's, I guess, India's naval capacity, I'm assuming.
I'm one of those people who likes to have a long-term plan. And even for this video, which is basically an introduction to the modern Indian Navy in 25 minutes or less, talking about their destroyer forces, this is the beginning of a process which is going to culminate with eventually, probably not this year, but in a few years' time, with a full series of videos about the Indian Navy since independence. The trouble is it's getting decent books about them. And I mean decent books which are in English, because there are a lot of different languages that get written in India. Quite a few do.
Well, at least he's aware. At least he's aware. But yeah, I'm surprised that it's not more common knowledge or promoted. I mean, one of the biggest ways for a nation to really promote its own strength, show it off. Show it off. I mean, Theodore Roosevelt did that. You know, where we had I forgot what they called it. It was like a white fleet or something, where it was just like 5 destroyers that were sent around the globe, literally showing its power to the rest of the nations. Like, oh, you guys can't touch us. We're going right past your borders, right by your nations, and no one's going to say a gosh dang thing. You know, speak softly, but carry a big stick, that kind of thing.
Get written in English. Luckily, those are useful, but it's actually getting them over here in the UK. And that's the more problem. I have a friend of mine who travels India regularly. And basically, the argument I have come up with for them is, could they please always bring some books back on naval stuff for me? And I pay them. Unfortunately, they're currently doing their PhD in Indian literature, and specifically poetry. So, their bags, for when they go to India, come back full anyway. So they never have space for my naval history books. But no, they're a very good friend. I think at some point I want to travel to India, but it's working out how to do it, whether to do it as a ship-shape trip or to do it as an independent trip once this channel's made a little bit more funding, because I'm not sure how much of the rest of my team are as willing as I am to travel around India, looking at all their naval history. And when I say willing, I mean the time it will take, because that's the thing, is if you consider we were able to do Japan quite quickly, because Japan has a very fast internal rail network, so we were able to do them in about a month's time. Australia, we literally were flying from point to point. India is more complicated than that. You can fly between bits, but also you need to do train for bits, and every time we've looked at a journey, it's looked at, to cover India properly and look at naval history there, it's worked out about 8 to 9 weeks in time. And that's a long time to be away. It's one thing for me, I've got no wife and kids, it's another thing for my colleagues. So this is my introduction to the Indian Navy.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, for me, constantly wanting to travel around India, it's like next to impossible. It's next to impossible, because there's flying, there's having to take a taxi, there's having to take trains, there's so many different routes of travel, yet nothing is like completely reliant. Like he was talking about, Japan is, you could take the train from coast to coast, the bullet train from coast to coast. In Australia, of course, you just fly, because all their main locations are literally on the shores. So there's nothing in the, what is it called? The bush of Australia. There's nothing like in the bush of Australia. It's just like a few major cities, major metropolitan cities along the shoreline. So it's easy to travel from one to the other. But India, there's just so much. But if you're just doing primarily investigating naval, like I think that's what his goal is, primarily like naval type of units, you primarily could, I guess. You could, because it's just all along the shore, just fly to those locations. But you have to go to a port, like an international port, land there, and then do domestic flights after that.
In terms of looking at their modern destroyers. And note it's going to be part of a growing series, but also note that the full overview of the Indian Navy I want to save till I've visited India, and I've actually spent some time going around their museums and looking at their naval history there in person. And that is something which I'm building up to. because I also want to combine it with hunting for my great uncle's grave, because one of my uncles is actually, who died during World War II, who died actually in the Indian Ocean, is buried in India. And we have a rough idea where it is, but we're not 100% sure. We know it's in an area and it's in one of 4 graveyards in that area.
India is inducting one new vessel every 30 days. That's fast turnaround.
This all starts off with the Rajput class. The Rajput class
what
are
kind of class
vehicle? They are very much of their time, and they are modified Kassin class of the Soviet Navy. And the Kassins, good ships at the time period. But these were roughly 4,000 tons standard, nearly 5,000 tons fully loaded. KOGAG, that's combined gas and gas powered destroyers, capable of 35 knots with a range of 4,500 nautical miles at 18 knots, so not bad, and 2,600 nautical miles at 30 knots, and top speed of 35 knots, so all fairly decent, armed with various missiles, various air defense weapons and land attack systems, and a helicopter. But it was still modified. They were built in the Soviet Union. They were built there. But they were, and I cannot emphasize this enough, they were modified to Indian needs. And these are a baseline. These are ships which are, in many ways, are a baseline of what the Indian Navy wants. The Indian Navy is looking for general-purpose destroyers. They don't have the size of fleet to specialize like the Soviet Union does. And they are more looking for, it's going to sound strange, there is a lot of Royal Navy heritage in the Indian Navy, in their approach to ship procurement, and their approach of what they're looking at for ships. And this is where I can sometimes get into trouble, but as you know, my process of evaluating ships is I very much do forensic engineering. I very much look at the design decisions of what they're actually emphasizing, what they're actually building, not the language they're using describing it, because people will talk. There's politics in all the areas of procurement, which means about 90% of what they say is emphasized in different ways to appeal to the audience they're talking to, not reflective of reality. The actual design, the actual structure, the actual how the weapon systems are focused, how the spaces are cleared for those weapon systems, what the balance is of the weaponry, that tells you a lot more. And when you look at the Indian construction of their ships and the way there's a lot of Royal Navy heritage going on there in terms of their approach to, we want a balanced and viable asset. One of the fun things I find with the Indian Navy is they are some of the places which have done the most effort to teach Gorshkov and the theorists from the Soviet side and of the naval debate during the Cold War and the naval theory debates. But they also teach Corbett, Mahan, and the various Indian authors. Again, I'm not naming the couple of Indian theorists I can think of at the moment because I want to do videos about them specifically. And I also don't want to mangle their names terribly. I'm still learning to pronounce them, so excuse me a second. I can do the ships. I am not so good with the names at the moment, and I'm getting better. But it's something I've been enjoying watching and studying about the Indian Navy for about last
I'm in the same boat.
decade and a half.
Never able to pronounce things correctly.
Because I started thinking, why are they doing this, and they've turned into a really good example of a Navy which is thinking about what they need. And this was the baseline. They started off with the Rajput class, they were building them, and they were basically going, okay, so yeah, we're getting them built elsewhere because we can't build something like this at the moment, but we want to study it. So we're going to have people involved in the building process. We're going to have people going out to Ukraine when they're being built. We're going to study the missile systems being included, but we also want something which is far more general purpose. These aren't true Kassin class. They are highly modified Kassin class. They are highly focused on what the Indian Navy needed. And they serve as a baseline. And it's a good baseline. It's a starting point. But it's a starting point which then leads to the Delhi class. And the Delhi class are some of my favorite vessels. They build 3 of them. And one of the things you notice about the Indian Navy is they order 5 of the Rajput class. There are 2 no longer in service and 3 still in service. Currently, they have 3 Rajput, 3 Delhi, 3 Kolkata, and I think it is 4, and I'm going to practice this, Visakhapatnam, which are lovely ships. Visakhapatnam. They are lovely, lovely ships. And they have evolved each generation. Each generation has evolved and developed. Now, the Delhis are the original Project 15 class of destroyers, but they're also something else special. They really are. These ships are not just a stretch Rajput class. They're not just taking some ideas from the frigates they were working on at the time, the Godvallis, and some stuff from the Sovereign class destroyers. They're not just putting those things together. They're putting everything together to make a destroyer which is better suited to their needs. And they're fitting them with flag and command facilities. This is very important this time because this shows that the Indians aren't just thinking about a centralized task group built around carrier structures and traditional structures. They're also thinking about independent surface action groups. And they want these destroyers to be the basis of them. They want these destroyers to be the basis of projecting of power and status and the growing capability of the Indian Navy. And they've kept upgrading them, which is another great thing. You can see that when you start looking at these ships and you start looking at the early pictures of them and the modern pictures of them and how the weapon systems have changed, how various things have been included. It's really an amazing and useful development for them. And that's the point.
That's smart.
The point of these
I think the only good thing about, again, you always want to upgrade your equipment. The fact that each one is a rolling base command where each one can operate its own unique infrastructure out of its ship and be able to communicate with others. That's incredibly crucial. Incredibly crucial. Of course, all ships have a way of, communicating and doing things, but the way they're putting an emphasis on communications is very, very smart. Very smart. I wonder if it has like a system where it, well, probably has a dish and everything else where it can boost more of a signal just in case there's some kind of jamming field or who knows. Who knows? But when it comes to like I know India has like one of the greatest, well, the US has the largest military in the world. However, domestically, India has the largest. Domestically. Why? Because, well, they're not in the midst of somewhere across the globe just playing policeman for another nation. Why would you send your troops off to sacrifice them to protect another nation? Oh, it's a friend. No. Let the nations who can't stand for themselves deal with themselves. Yeah, I'm against that. But it's like, yeah, so India needs to prioritize being able to defense capabilities, especially since it doesn't want to do outright assault. So if it's prioritizing defense, it would make sense that most of it is based off of that kind of mindset. And yes, I'm speaking of utter nonsense. But at the same time, when it comes to like the military, I like how it's primarily defense oriented. I really think most nations would do better if that was the case. You close borders, work on defense. That's all you need to do. Close borders, work on defense. Vet people who wanna not travel to your nation, but want to become a part of your nation. You vet those people. Yeah, because protection is always like the top priority. The top priority, especially if you're trying to, well, of course, protect your nation.
Has increasingly been about showing the status and capability of India as a rising nation. These destroyers have been a very good example of this. These ones, they grow so much. They're 6,200 tons fully loaded. We talked about the previous ones, the Rajput class. They basically came in at just under 5,000 tons fully loaded. So they are over 1,200 tons greater in terms of mass. They have grown nearly 20 meters in length. They have grown over a meter in beam. They have grown in so many ways and so much capability. But they've dropped in terms of top speed down to 32 knots. Why? Because probably at a certain level, and I hate to say this, but the top speed of warships, as long as it's over 30 knots, really doesn't matter that much. These days, when you're dealing with aircraft that will do hundreds of knots, and missiles, etc., that are going, thousands perhaps of knots, and all these other systems which are going very incredibly fast. Yeah, we can do 35 knots. Yeah, we can do 30 knots. That's strategic movement. In terms of the tactical sense, when you're engaging an air threat, what matters isn't your movement speed. What matters is your ability to
defense capabilities,
decoys, to put out active missile systems to engage them and intercept them. Guns and other things as backup layers should anything get through that missile layer. All those things matter.
I mean, the knots are important if you're trying to speed to a location, but again, if you're focusing primarily on defense, speed doesn't really matter. I mean, your naval force would always remain around your nation. You don't need to constantly travel out like the way the US constantly does, sending frigates everywhere, always being everywhere, instead of just keeping its naval fleet around the nation. No, its naval fleet is everywhere, which it makes sense that the US needs to prioritize speed because it needs to get to a location very quickly. However, if you're prioritizing defense, speed isn't that crucial, especially if it's defense. You can have aircraft get there 20 times faster than sending a naval vessel around to the other side. So that's why it's like, I think sacrificing speed for defense capabilities and strength of the artillery is far more important.
Now, what they don't interest me, though, is that if we consider it, Delhi class could once again do 4,500 nautical miles at 18 knots. So they had the same cruising speed, same cruising range, listed as their standard, which meant, again, it's about task group operations, about these ships working together. And at this point, when these come into service, them and the 5 Rajputs, these are 8 destroyers. These are the command ones. So if there's a group, it's going to be built around one of these and a Rajput. That's what it's going to be built as.
America is a superpower. That's why it has the largest navy. Well, it just has the largest military in the world, just because India is good, but it focuses more on the Indian Ocean because of China. Or did I read something wrong there? Indid is good. I probably missed something, but it focuses more on the India because of the China. I think everyone primarily does. Everyone primarily does. Trying to protect their shipping containers, their oil frigates.
Surface action group is going to be built around them. It's going to be built around their viability. And that's the interesting thing. That is the really interesting thing. Although, as said, it's worth noting that the Indian Navy now has 13 destroyers in service. They are more than double the Royal Navy in terms of the British Royal Navy. And they are a growing force.
Good.
The class which follows the Visakhapatnam is going to be an interesting design. They are the Project 18 next generation, and I haven't done much chat about them in this video. There isn't going to be a discussion on them because they're planning 10 to 12 of these vessels. They haven't started construction yet. They're still in the design phase. But I do
Countries
want to
training
talk about
elite soldiers only to get one trapped by a basement dweller with an
but they're a
RC
really
drone.
interesting class, and they've shot up to 13,000 tons and 144 VLSRs.
Everyone's got eyes. Everyone's got cameras.
They are big beasts, and in many ways, that's where a lot of modern destroyers are going. Now, the other thing that interests me, though, with the Delhi class is how the armament has changed and evolved over time, and how you can see the work of India going on with Israel, the Barak missile system, which is a pretty good missile system again. It's an Israeli-Indian sort of working program, primarily led by the Israelis, but the Indians have been heavily involved in it from almost the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And the Indian Navy are by far one of the largest equippers of it. They have fitted it.
I mean, it's primarily that defense capabilities which has protected Israel from some of the bombing strikes. It's those capabilities. It's crazy. It's crazy. Tel Aviv mentioned. Yeah. Of course. It's everywhere. It's real. Is real. That there's a reason why it's called that, right? It is real. It's real. It's everywhere. It's in my walls. It's it's everywhere.
To 15 warships. 11.
But that's the thing. It's just like all governments seem to they seem to communicate with one another, especially with allied forces, or they steal from one another. I mean, heck, my brother has seen the kind of situations where he would be like on a military base and he would do like contracting work for like working on a facility to upgrade some equipment, and then a bus of Chinese nationals stops by. You're not allowed cameras, you're not allowed phones while on the premises, and then all the Chinese nationals storm out pretending they don't understand what's being spoken, and they're taking pictures, they're recording, they're doing everything they're not supposed to be doing. Of course, but there's always that going to happen. I mean, the US does it to China, the US does it to Russia, Russia does it to the US. It's like it's an espionage game. Everyone's trying to take the information and the knowledge, the defense capabilities and weapons capabilities of another nation, so that way they can utilize that as well. Because no matter what, everyone talks about how it's like I'm trying to say it so I don't, in a way where I don't get flagged, but how robots are going the way of, self-gratification. AI is going the way of self-gratification. Honestly, I think that's secondary, because throughout time, the one thing that pushed, that has furthered modernization has been warfare. Warfare has been the thing that no matter what happens, other nations get a hold of it and utilize it themselves. Because there have been things that were like agricultural sewage waste that happened tens of thousands of years ago in like Indus Valley and locations like that, which, heck, at the start of New York, we didn't even know about that kind of crap. Like New York City was a sewage wasteland where they just tossed things out of the window, and that city was built from the ground up. And it just didn't have that in mind, because we just had forgotten about it at that point in time. But what did continue over? The bow and arrow. What did continue over? Knowing how to make steel. What did continue over? The pistol, the rifle, the automatic rifle, nuclear weapons. No matter what, it's always weaponry that seems to push more advancement than anything else. And then a close second is self-gratification kind of content.
That are currently operational, including the Vikramaditya, the Virat, which was decommissioned. That's 2 aircraft carriers, the Delhis, the Rajputs, the Shivat class frigates, and the Brahmatra class frigates.
The only thing that can unite all the countries is the threat of an alien invasion. But Donald Trump will probably make it happen.
That has led to several scandals in India over people looking at going, why are they doing a single source procurement of it? And I'd argue it's probably because it's such a good missile system, but also, once you've got into that system, okay, why look elsewhere? You've got logistics, you've got everything set up. It's one of those interesting things where people go, well, you're doing a single source procurement. And I can understand why, because again, once you've got something that's working and inbuilt into your system, you might as well keep procuring that, because you know it works until you've got your own next generation. And the thing that India really loves is producing their own indigenous version of systems.
Yep.
And developing themselves. So often what you'll see is a lot of transitory systems of them adopting a system for this period
and then upgrading
and then going independent. And again, if you think about it from that perspective, the Barrack missile system makes sense because they've gone into the Standard missile program, or if they've gone into the Soviet, now Russian missile systems, or if they've gone into the European things like the Astra missile system, they'd be part of an ongoing missile program. It'd be very difficult to justify necessarily breaking off and doing an indigenous approach.
Well, the funny thing is a lot of those missile systems that were made in other nations utilized a lot of Indian mines. So now India's decided to start making its own. But that's something I find fascinating because it's like, what was it? I think it is rocketry, where it's about how they're assisting someone just to kind of take the knowledge back for themselves. It seems pretty cool. I still need to see that film. But yeah, India's always been like at the forefront of a lot of creations.
Whereas the Israeli one, it's a good missile system, but Israel aren't looking at you as an ongoing forever customer. They're looking at you as a customer for now. You're not buying yourself into a program, a massive development program. You're buying yourself into something that's going to cover you until you've got your own indigenous capability.
Mm-hmm.
The Delhi class were about providing leadership for that indigenous capability, and I really do consider it a very sensible thing that they went the extra mile to include flag facilities in these ships at the beginning, because that gave them something to work from. That being said, though, we're now at the ship's butt plug. There is no way this video makes it 25 minutes, is there? I've got 2 up class to go. I love these videos. I love these ships. I said at the beginning, the Indian Navy is something which is a personal study point for me, and every time they visit the UK, I've done my best to try and get aboard.
I think this is funny. He's promoting his product, and he just shameless book plug. Got it.
One of the occasions. Because basically the things that usually stop you, because they're very welcome, very friendly people, is usually it's actually timeline of whether you're free or not. If you are free and able to make it, they're often very, very happy to welcome aboard people who are very interested in the Indian Navy. As long as you book appropriately, you can't just saunter up to the side and go, "Hello, mate, will you let me on?" That doesn't tend to work. But if you make the appropriate bookings and organise it, they are usually very happy to say hello to you and very happy to show you around, because they're very keen on growing their navy. They're very keen on it. The Indian Navy is one of the navies which is most proselytizing on the issues of naval power and sea power. They're always making the case for themselves. You'd think for a nation which has such a lot, which is basically sea border, and mountains, you think they'd be very, very easy to make the case for naval power. No, it's still quite hard, because those land borders are contentious issues.
Mm-hmm.
And the army has always been a very dominant factor and a very dominant service in Indian politics and defence procurement. So the Navy has to make its case for sea power very, very strongly in order to be able to survive, in order to justify its existence. And they do this very well. I would say there are issues still. But India is pushing itself forward and is really growing quite competent and quite capable in terms of development. And they're independent. Their indigenous carrier design is actually a pretty good carrier, and they've got more of them coming down the line. They've got more of these ideas coming along, and India is a growing naval power. We spend so much of our time looking at China that India can get ignored very easily, and it shouldn't be. India's a growing naval power in a very key part of the world in terms of the
well, it's
trade.
A good thing other people can see it too. And like India's a first world power, like a world power, but it's ignored by everyone. It's absolutely ignored by everyone. I don't know why. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me, because I mean, I could understand maybe a few years ago, maybe a little over a decade ago, maybe around 10 years, because it was always the butt of the joke. Like France is known as the coward nation. They'll always throw up the white flag and surrender. India was seen as the one who is just the pacifist. They were the one you could easily kick around because they're unimportant. They've always been viewed that way. There's like, oh, you can get them to do whatever you want. They're cheap. They're unimportant. That was always been the perspective. That's always how they've been viewed. But heck, it's completely changed. Completely changed. For better and for worse, because now that it's so modernized, you're, like I said, I've mentioned this before, India's going to get a crash course of modernization way too quickly because the US is dealing with its people not understanding what the world is like, so getting themselves stuck in these small little communities online because the world is such a small place now, that India is doing a crash course of that, and the next generation in India is going to be just as bad as the next generation in the US. But it's going to be a rush job, which means it's going to be a lot of disconnect between generations. Like, I can see how the domino effect happened here in the US. In India, it's just like that, and you're going to end up with a brain dead generation. Not all, but a lot will be. But yeah, India's always been absolutely ignored. When it's factual that they have the strongest military on their own soil. Yeah, because the U.S.'s military is everywhere, but its own nation. Oh, but yeah.
The Indian Ocean, if you think about it, India is a growing power there. It becomes a very dominant power on the global trade network because there aren't many other powers who can match it indigenously in the Indian Ocean. There are other powers who are present in the Indian Ocean, but in terms of matching the Indian Navy as it grows in strength, very few. Now, I have to say, when I was looking at the Kolkata class, I found an article on Reddit which has stuff in there which I cannot not quote. So, Ajay Shukla, thank you for a very well written article. It's a very interesting article to me because I remember writing something similar about the Royal Navy, the British Royal Navy, contemporaneously with this. And this was written in 2012. And it starts off with, according to a 2010 CAG report on warship building, this year the Navy will have just 44% of the destroyers it needs, 61% of the frigates, and 20% of its requirement of corvettes. And I am sure I wrote something similar about the Royal Navy contemporaneously with that. So thank you. But the quote that really made me interested was that the Navy has only itself to blame for delays in Project 15A, which was the Kolkata class. With MDL having successfully built 3 destroyers on Project 15, that was Delhi, Mysore, and Mumbai. Project 15A was to be a follow-on class. 3 more destroyers built quickly using basically the same design technologies. Instead, the Navy demanded 2,363 modifications, including major changes in weaponry, sensors, and helicopter systems. Yes, they did. They decided to make it even more suitable to Indian needs as they were growing at the time. And honestly, I respect it. I respect the game. I respect the requiring of this one. They grow in size. Their full load displacement goes up to 7,400 tons. Their standard displacement is 6,800 tons. These ships have gotten even bigger than their predecessors, the Delhi class. They have grown even more. And they're also built to stealth standards. And considering when they're built, between 2003 and 2015, and yes, I'm not joking, the Kolkata was laid down in 2003, she's commissioned in 2014. Kochi was laid down in 2005, she's commissioned in 2015. And Chennai is laid down in 2006, and she's commissioned in November 2016. So yes, that is 11 years, nearly for Kolkata, and the rest are around about the 10-year mark, a little bit over in case of Chennai. Good ships, though. Really good ships. They also were about pushing up the level of what India was able to achieve themselves. And they grew themselves up. They have the Barak 8 SAM system. They have all sorts of systems, including BrahMos missiles, all the capabilities added in to grow their capabilities and give them a stronger ability as destroyers. I also love that they have 4 AK-630s for close weapon systems. Now, some people look at those systems and go, well, they're the Soviet-built AK systems. Yes, they are. And yes, those are barrels which are 6 30mm.
I mean, if they work, they work.
And again, I will refer the audience to the problem which a lot of navies are currently having with drone warfare, where people keep going, are we going to be using multi-million-pound missiles to engage very small, very cheap drones? They can only actually damage us if they get very close. And you sit there and go, well, actually, we don't have to. We can use the missiles. If they're going after a target like an oil tanker, which is out of range of everything else on the system, and they're going to cause damage outside, far in excess of the cost of that missile, then frankly, we should probably take them. It's the ripple on damage to the economics. But if they're coming after the ship, the warship itself, well, if it has enough small guns on it, that's a traditional method. How did we deal with torpedo boats? We built torpedo boat destroyers, but also we fitted all our ships with 3-inch and similar guns, which could rapid fire, and enough of them so they could basically smash torpedo boats out of existence before they got into torpedo launching range.
Yeah.
It's
You basically you have a bullet wall at that point. You can stop anything if the entire sky is a bullet.
similar dealing with drones. 20mm, 30mm, 57mm, 40mm, 76mm, AK 3-inch, all these things. If you're talking about navies which have those
No
systems
need to
in large
use an
numbers, they
expensive
are being
missile
far
when you can
more
literally just use a bullet.
drones come, drones go, drones are a problem, but we'll think about them, than navies which have gone, we're going to go missile for everything. Yes, you are. And there's a small problem now. Well, the missiles are very, very good. Yes, they are. But they're also kind of expensive compared to the targets they're engaging. Yes, they are. They're also kind of overkill. Yes, they are. And I know those same nations are currently leading development in terms of laser weaponry.
Yeah, I know he won the election.
On the ships.
Of course he did.
But you sit there and go...
And of course, the woman he had been, you know, his family wasn't there, but the woman apparently that he had some time with posted something about it.
Is that because you don't want to admit that you should have just fitted some more guns in the first place? So now you're going for lasers, because at least that's high-tech and doesn't suggest that you were being silly not fitting guns in the first place. But anyway, we're digressing from the Indian Navy, and they're very good choices. They've also got a combat suite, which they are slowly developing and getting pretty good at. The Indian combat suite itself, in terms of combat management systems, have started to...
But Levi, these known resources are not what are hidden, like different technologies, which U.S. has much more than any country. What are you referring to? I mean, because the U.S. has, well, especially like the attack on Maduro, a few weapons have been exposed. I know it was years ago when our stealth chopper was crash landed, and it was basically picked apart, and the pieces were sold to China. Of course, the highest bidder. Yeah, a lot of the capabilities that the U.S. is aware of are has kept under wraps and are now utilizing around the globe for operations. That's why there's always espionage. That's why there's always secret agents from other nations trying to get a hold, like I mentioned in the beginning, where they'll just storm locations pretending they don't understand what's going on, and then, yeah, try to document everything there.
Produce a very interesting capability. There's always the question is, we use Aegis and the Aegis combat system as the benchmark. So usually we go, is it as good as Aegis? Is it not as good as Aegis? When you go, something is not as good as Aegis, everyone goes, well, why didn't they use Aegis? Well, they're developing themselves. What I would say, as I understand it, and of course I am not party to any secret details or anything like that, I'm just looking at from the stats and the papers I've been able to read open source to discuss it, and the people I've been able to talk about it. No, it's not yet at Aegis level, but it's not as far off it as might make people feel comfortable. It is definitely fairly, if you consider the European systems, most of them are about on Aegis level. Different sensors, slightly different processing, but they are, similar enough that, frankly, you really wouldn't want to go. It wouldn't go with 6. You wouldn't go this one.
Magnet gratification technology, floating things. Yeah, not alien UFO, but it's human technology now. Well, honestly, if I'm going to be honest about that, I feel exactly the same. If no other nation has come out with how many nations now have traveled into the stars, and no other nation is coming out to either debunk or say anything about it, speaks volumes. It absolutely speaks volumes.
One's definitely better than this one. You go half a dozen one, 6 of the other when you look at them. We're talking combat management systems here, by the way. Just to clarify before anyone starts putting interesting comments down in the comment. The Indian systems, they're growing. They're getting very, very good.
Yep.
And next generation, their future destroyers, I wouldn't be surprised if they're getting up there. If they are.
India is designing its own AI. Like China has its own AI. The U.S. has... I don't think the U.S. government has its own AI, but there are multiple versions of AI developed through the companies in the U.S., like Google, Meta, Apple... there's Microsoft. All of them have their own individual AI. I guess Chat GBT. There's a litany of AI type of things in the US. But in like China, there's like one category. In India, they're trying to develop like one in-house that'll just be utilized. And I think that's smart. I think it's smart to have like one that's, I know a lot of it borrows from each other, which I guess means they're all the same, but the fact that it's developing its own AI in-house, its own code, and it probably is reverse engineered from other AIs. Of course, that's how you do it. You have to develop your own, and then you start utilizing it in advanced warfare. I mean, I just don't want it to end up like War Games. If anyone has seen that old movie, you know what I mean.
Because they put a lot of work, a lot of effort into developing it. And that's important. Indigenization is a massive thing for the Indian Navy. Building support, and it's one of the ways they're approaching building support for the Navy. If the Navy just exists as we just use foreign procured systems to carry out these jobs rather than employing Indian people and working within our nation, that would make it far more difficult to justify the expense.
Well, and it's the issue that comes with it, like the whole, what was it, in the Ghazi attack. I mean, I made a joke about it because the PNS, which Pakistan, I think it was Pakistan that was using it, or was it the one that, like, I don't know. It was Pakistan's ship. Well, I think it was their submarine. Literally drowned itself. It was an old U.S. Naval vessel which was sold to Pakistan. Pakistan utilized it, and well, all the people in the naval vessel drowned. They just went blip on the radar and completely sank in there. No one knows exactly what happened. From what I understand, no one knows the exact cause, but it just seems like it was a malfunction. When it's not yours, you can't fully trust it. When it's not yours, all they did, yeah, it was Pakistan submarine. All they did was just purchased it, probably change up a bit of it, and then utilized it. Like, I personally believe, like, you'd have to work for something yourself. You have to work for something yourself. You have to, like, the ones in-house, the ones native, you're going to trust a little more. You're going to trust a little more. I mean, I don't completely agree when it's like a product, like bag of dog food. I don't really trust it. Why? Because it says there's a zipper. Like the other day, I was opening a cat food bag. I opened it, and the peel was at the top, and then the zip, like it was supposed to have like a pull for, so you can open and shut the bag. Well, the peel was underneath the zipper. So what was the point of having a seal above the rip line? Because it was just poorly manufactured. It was made in the U.S. Of course, we don't actually look at what we're doing here, because they're trying to start making stuff here once again. But now I see this is why it all went outsourced.
But the more you are building this domestically, the more it is part of national employment, the more it is part of improving and providing jobs nationally. Yes, I know it's called pork barrel politics, but it's also sensible in terms of naval procurement. One of the things that's often misunderstood about the UK system and the issues is we talk about the closing down of the mines and the various other things. People don't talk about how the winding down of the Royal Navy and the infrastructure which went into support, the defence infrastructure which went into support the Royal Navy and keep its facilities going, that also had an impact. That had a massive impact on areas in the country. There are whole ports, whole facilities, which used to employ hundreds, if not thousands of people, which are now being turned into blocks of flats, which provide accommodation.
Same thing happened in the U.S.,
but don't provide necessarily the same level of employment. And the Indian Navy,
like there were hundreds of bases, thousands of military bases all over the U.S., like quick response locations. Like, you would drive down the freeway and you would pass like multitude of military bases. But when Bill Clinton was in office, he like closed, I think it was 75% of them, if maybe a little less. He closed like 75%, 50 to 75% of them. And yeah, a lot of people lost their livelihoods because you didn't just have military people on base. They were the normal people who supplied them. They were the people working in the cafeterias. There were just so many people that lost their livelihoods because, oh, this military base, we're going to turn it into a museum. And then you only have like 5 people working there, when originally you had thousands of military personnel and hundreds of civilians working there. Yeah, and then now you just have 5 people there. People end up losing jobs because of it. And it's always good to focus on defense. I think defense is a high priority, which is what I respect India for. It's primarily only defense.
He has learned from this. The Navy has learned. We built up these things domestically, and we will have a capability. And again, you start to look at these ships and you go, okay, so what's changed between them? What has made them develop into this class? And again, they are bigger. Their speed has dropped to about 30 knots, but they can now do 6,000 nautical miles at 18 knots. Ooh, that cruising range has gone up a decent amount. They've got a lot more interesting decoys, including the, and I'm going to get this right, the Maresh Advanced Torpedo Decoy System, which is a fairly good system again. One of the things you have to think about with the Indian Navy is they are very combat focused. Why? Because wherever they look, they see threats, quite legitimately.
Yeah.
They have ongoing issues with Pakistan, which is understood worldwide. They have ongoing issues on their border with China, which has led to the interesting thing of troops on both sides engaging each other with sticks and stones, because apparently as long as they don't use guns and bullets, it's not actually a war. There has been a lot of interesting history going on there, and so the Indian Navy is constantly looking around going, we have to be prepared. Does this mean they always do well? Not always. But I would say recently the Indian Navy has been definitely acquitting itself well in the face of adversity, and has been performing
Earlier we
very
were
high-level
defensive
tasking
now,
missions.
but only
And this
only
class
but
were
now
part of the development.
defensive,
But what was
offensive. Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
to me with them is what came next, because
You got to retaliate.
and I will get
You
this
got to
right.
retaliate.
I will get this right. The Vusa Kaputnan class are probably the leading example of this. This class are also known as the Project 15 Bs. They are the final development of Project 15 that starts all the way back with the Delhis. And they are built upon the Kulturs. They have improved stealth. They have improved resilience within their system. One of the interesting things, the Indian Navy has been quite happy to embrace a level of automation and mechanization, but the crew numbers haven't really reduced. What they've done is they've implemented it to improve the efficiency of the crews and to allow them to do even more. So as the ships have got more complex, they've done the best they can to offload things which, frankly, you don't really need a person to do these days anymore to an automated system, and just have people checking the automated systems. And the Navy is quite...
So more people are losing their jobs. But again, sometimes it's easier to trust a machine with the task, and then you just have a person make sure the machine is continuing to do its task. That's funny, like, playing Pragmata, that was kind of the issue. The more of the jobs were passed over to the machine, whatever they were called, to do the job, because, well, they'll just do it 100% of the time, 24/7, never needing to rest, never needing to break, just continuously doing it. And then you just have people go on and getting bored playing games on their phones because, well, what do they have to do now? Constantly look at the screen. It's like, oh, it's running fine. Oh, it's running fine. Oh, it's running fine.
keen on this. Now, again, these ships got faster. They could go 33.5 knots or faster, and they can now do 9,000 nautical miles at 18 knots, which is frankly amazing. It is amazing. Think about that in terms of range and capability. That's a really capable system. Again, one of the things you find with a lot of Indian ships, they are able to operate in areas which have had nuclear fallout, nuclear biological, chemical warfare. They are designed with that as a reality in their system. Again, this probably relates to the issues which they have with Pakistan. Mm-hmm. And for this class, and here's a stat which I, again, really loved when I found out, and I've read it in a couple of different works, and Times of India has some good articles. Times of India does have some good articles on their ships. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if that is part of the Indian Navy's approach to outreach. For this class, 72% to 75%, depending on the class we want to talk about, of their components are indigenously sourced. This was proposed as the previous ones. The Kulturs were roughly 60%, and the Delhis were down at 42%. So that is a massive upgrade in its capability. They've distributed their power systems. They've done all sorts of interesting designs and capabilities to make these ships as survivable and as comfortable for long-range operations as possible. And again, when you start to look down their weapon lists, okay, they're carrying 32 barricades. Good. They're carrying 16 Brahmos anti-ship missiles. They're carrying torpedoes. They're carrying all these things. They're not overly heavily armed. They've got a lot of interesting systems, though, developing them and growing them. And then we start looking at their guns, and you go, well, they have the Otto Malera 76 forward. Very nice. A good 3-inch gun forward. They have 4 of those AK-630s, again. It's a mixture of Russian systems, of European systems, of Israeli systems, of Indian-built systems. And they've got 4 OFT, that's Ordnance Factory. And I am going to get this right, because it is the Indian Ordnance Factory, and I'm going to get his name right. It's sometimes called Tricky, but technically it's supposed to be pronounced as Tiruchirappalli. Tiruchirappalli. Now, I will say this, I'm probably going to stick with Tricky for the rest of the discussion on, but yeah. And they have produced these 12.7mm stabilized remote gun positions, which again are part of the ability of dealing with drones and dealing with the threats which are likely to come up. And again, I would like to point out, these ships, they were built, laid down 2013 for the first of the class, commissioned 2021. Second was 2015, commissioned 2022. third was 2017, commissioned December 2023, and the fourth was 2018 and commissioned in 2025. So,
Coming out every year.
roughly 7-8 years for each one. Well, let me say that 8 years for the first, 7 years for the second, and the third is 6-ish, and the fourth is 7-ish. Just heading in the direction of 7. They're speeding up, and they are good ships. These are, I would say, equivalent to, in terms of Indian construction, to the Hobarts, Darings, and Akizukis. And that's what they were looking at. And the reason I picked those three is because when you're looking at Indian sources at the time, contemporaneous news articles, that is what they're comparing them to. But the difference, I would say, is in many ways these are batch free of a free batch program. And so they are actually vessels, I would argue, 7 to 11. No, 7 to 10. Sorry, I added an extra one for some reason. And that makes a lot of sense in terms of their pricing. And also makes sense in terms of the systems, in terms of developing and training them, because when you start comparing them to their previous generations, when you compare them to the previous classes, you can really see how they have grown. Where the design differences have started to come in, where the growth and capabilities have started to emerge, but also you're starting to see a shaping appear in terms of Indian design. Look at these ships. And look at this one. This is very much, it's Indian, but it's the Soviet build. You can tell this is Soviet built the ship. From a shaping, it looks glaringly Soviet. Last one, starting to look a little less Soviet. Not quite Indian, but a little less Soviet. And then we've got this class. And suddenly you have very much Indian shaping coming in terms of, we are building ships which are, you are going to tell just from looking at their lines, looking at their shaping of their structure, these are Indian ships. And that's an important thing in terms of building out national presence and building out national capabilities. And they did it. It'll be really interesting to see what comes in terms of the future. And that's one of the reasons why I haven't gone into the Project 18 ships. Is because, to me, they're going to be a growth on this. And they're going to be a growth realizing about the capabilities. And one of the things they talk about is integrated electric propulsion. They talk about also things to grow and develop their capabilities. Also, they're going to be the next class to have command and flag facilities built into them from the get-go. Now, they will be built contemporaneously to the Project 17 frigates, which they're also planning on working.
Like, I believe India should do like what the U.S. did back during Theodore Roosevelt. Like, now that it has more capabilities on the ocean, as soon as it has enough of a backlog, send a few of your brand new ships, a fleet of them, around the globe. Show off power, show off strength. I mean, yes, it'd be more complex to do it this day and age, but you have to flex. India needs to flex, because right now it's just so interesting and so freaking insane, the type of discussion that happens around it all when India does have a lot of power. And I don't like the term soft power, especially when in India it's obvious, but people throw around soft power for India. Why? Because a lot of people just don't see India as power. Everyone's so used to just it being the U.S., or Americans are just used to only thinking the U.S. is at the top. China's used to only thinking China's at the top. Russia's used to only thinking Russia's at the top. And then the others are just an annoyance to them. Yeah, no one sees India as the one who's gonna climb the ranks, especially since Britain basically mined it into the Stone Age. They harvested it for all its wealth and left. That's exactly what happened. Allowing the partition to take place and then allowing everything to just fall apart as they ran away. And the fact that India hasn't even been 80 years, if I'm correct, has been able to, well, not even, yeah. Because it was, I think next year it's 80 years, right? Next year. And 27th, that'll be the 80th anniversary of India's independence. Because I think it was 1947. I think it was 1947. So yeah, I mean, the fact that India went from being, well, let's be honest, the weakest, most belittled, like tiniest nation because, well, Britain took everything and left it to fend for itself on a civil war footing. It was like, yeah, it's the very far bottom, very far bottom. For it to be all the way at the top, like butting heads with the U.S., with China, with having the same kind of capabilities is crazy. It's crazy. In less than 80 years. In less than 80 years. In like one lifetime. In like a little less than a lifetime. Hopefully we all live to be so 80 to 90 to 100 years old. In less than one lifetime, India's already climbed its way all the way back to the top. India has planned a vision for 2045 vision, so we are planning the world game, or we are playing the world game. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's just like if India could get it to like literally not buddy, but literally put a crown on its head and walk into the location with China and the U.S. and Russia on equal footing. I mean, that within 100 years, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Or well, the 17 Bravo frigates, the 17 Alphas are already in service, and that if you look up them, the Nilgiri class, you'll see, okay, there is really starting to be an Indian shaping to ships, and it's not just in the destroyers, it's in the frigates, it's in everything they're building. And that's a good thing. That's I've already said.
And that's why we don't conflicts or war. We want
now,
peace.
Eventually, the Vishal will probably enter service, and that's the IAC-3, which is currently in its planning phase. That's their future aircraft carrier.
Yeah, got to stomp out the
they're going to be building
problems.
more task groups and more surface action groups. So, with the current proposal being that they are going to build, and I do mean this is a listed build of 10 to 12 destroyers for the Project 18 Next Generation destroyers, which will probably replace, wouldn't be surprised. I think they will replace everything that's eventually apart from the Vusa Kaputman class, this class. And I wouldn't be surprised if this class is then replaced by the next set of destroyers after that. Because, to my mind, the Indian Navy's force structure is looking at needing close at 18 destroyers. Because they have the East and the West and the various naval commands. And when you've got carrier groups of support and surface action groups...
Conflict is affecting growth this year?
This is the point I'm coming to.
Yeah, well, I can believe that.
I'd like you to put yourself in the mind of the Indian naval planners for the next 20 odd years and work out not just what force structure you need, but why you need it. I'd like you to go and look at the Indian situation. I'd like you to go look at what they're building. And also be realistic about the time and pace they're building, because one of the problems of indigenization is it tends to increase cost and add to delays. It does, because there are lots of people having to build things for the first time. And first time you're building something, you're always going to A, underestimate the time it requires, and B, underestimate the complexity. You always do. Everyone does this. Just think about it yourself. The first time you've got some IKEA furniture, your first ever piece of IKEA furniture, you probably said something like, oh, I'll knock this out in 20 minutes. And you probably could, but it's fiddly, and there's a process you have to learn, etc. And I've now built enough IKEA furniture over the years, I can knock out things like a Calyx in 20 minutes. I can do that.
The naval vessel is an IKEA furniture.
Instruction manual, everything. The first one I ever built took me a good 40 minutes. Why? Because I was learning the process. Learning the system.
But we always get effed by anyone. We have to hop in and finish the conflict with, which can stop growth. Yeah,
you're going for even more advanced systems than an IKEA Calyx bookshelf. So it takes time.
But the benefit is...
So factor that into your thinking, okay? When you're planning a force structure...
The benefit is, if India keeps getting involved or doing preemptive strikes and eradicating the problem, just think of it as that's more training for the military, that's more training for the naval, that's more training for the Air Force. That's just more training all around. Every single group, even the special operations, all of it gets more training. That's how I view it.
That's how I view it. Process and a selling your navy to your nation process. It'd be really interesting to see what you're saying. It'd be really interesting to see what comes up in terms of your suggestions of what they need. Now, that being said, what do we have coming up? Well, this video will come out the week before. Oh, Cold War, building a nation and a force. Japan and the rebuilding a nation and a force. Japan, the forging of a destroyer navy. That's a fun video. That is a really fun video. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. I'd never seen his videos before. Naval History with Dr. Alex. That's his channel. Honestly, I like the information he has. I really do. He just needs to be a little more entertaining. He's like that professor. You know he loves what he does, but he just doesn't have the energy to show excitement. He's just talking about it because he loves it, but he just doesn't have the ability to show excitement. I kind of wish he had a little more excitement and moving around and like maybe a little more than just a PowerPoint presentation, but I can't complain. I'm just a talking head right here. I'm just a talking head. So yeah, I'm worse. I'm worse than he is. He's got informative information and I got nothing. But naval history with Dr. Alex, and he seems to truly enjoy it. He talks, it seems like, because he was referencing traveling to Japan. He's planning on traveling to India to do probably a on-site type of video, which would be pretty interesting. But yeah, I gotta say that was pretty cool. I did enjoy some of that information. In the beginning, I'm just like, crap, this is crap I have no information on, because I love ships. Like, I know a lot of autistic people like trains, even though I love trains, but I've been more into ships. I've always been more into ships. I remember when I lived in San Francisco, and they, at that point in time, they had the naval vessels. They're like ancient naval vessels from World War II, open to the public. They're still seafaring. They still have weapon capabilities. They still are completely operational, but they're set to retirement, but they're parked there for people to go in, walk through, kind of see what it's like. And I was not fully grown at that point in time, and even then I was bumping my head on the metal, having to walk through like this, because there was no space for me. There was no space, and I just loved it. I loved it. And the fact that they were talking about, yeah, like if something happened tomorrow, this thing could be out in the oceans, shooting down vessels, or yeah, it used for defense if something happened the very next day. And I thought that was pretty interesting. It's right there for everyone to walk in, but if something happens, everyone's kicked out and that vessel's being put into action, even though it's been retired. I forgot the word, but even though it's been set to the side, no longer going to be used, it's still usable. So in a pinch, it'll actually absolutely be utilized. And I've always found that kind of history fascinating. I've always found it very fascinating. But the neighbors and the 0.5 don't have ability or the money power to do crap, so it's the elites of the world playing the game, and India knows it, and it is playing too. Well, yeah. Like I've said, a lot of how the US, how China, how Russia compete is not in the actual battlefield. It's using they have proxies. They have proxy wars. It's kind of like back in the day where you could call a second. When a duel was going to happen, you would call a second who would fight in your place. Because the rich and noble, elegant person gets offended by another rich and noble, elegant person. So you have the peasants fight for you. That's kind of how it is. The rich and elegant nobles don't want to get their hands dirty, so what do? They have squabbles with other nations, and it's not always the case, but a lot of the times it is. There's some kind of person there, just like there was that CIA operative that was found in India. In India, of course. But yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, that's why it feels epic but sad too for the normal people affected in this. Yeah. Because the people at the top always play with the people below. Like, that's the thing. You see it in structures of government. You see it in structures of the nations playing politics with one another. In government, where the governments are playing politics with one another. In states, same thing in like companies, where they do the exact same thing. The people at the top play with the people at the bottom, kind of just using them as scapegoats if needed. That's why I hate politics, because we don't need politicians. We need leaders. We need people who will lead the nations forward. We need people at the top of companies who will lead us. Like, look at the medical companies in the U.S. Just outright thievery. They're taking advantage of people who need medication to survive, because when people are fearing for their life, they're going to pay for that medication no matter what. They'll go in debt paying for medication because they need it to survive. And when you go to India and you can get the exact same medication for, what is it, like 10% off? For like, no, sorry, not 10% off, like 90% off. It costs like 10% of the value it is in the US for the exact same medication, for the exact same treatment. Because, again, we need leaders at the top. We need leaders who are willing to push things forward and not politicians. I hate politicians.
You guys got a video? Why is it so bad?
And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Why is it like that?